Yes, Logan Paul has sued Coffeezilla for saying mean things about his crypto scams. Hey Logan, I'm gonna say some mean things about you. You wanna dance? But who could have possibly have seen that Logan Paul's crypto ventures might not be on the up and up? I mean, you'd need at least one eye for that. But to take you back, he promised that his game, CryptoZoo, which combined cryptocurrency and NFTs, would allow users to make real money with barely any effort.
It's a really fun game that makes you money. I really, really do believe it is going to be the catalyst for a lot of young people getting into crypto. I think this will be their first fun NFT crypto experience. My game.
Now, it's possible that CryptoZoo might have made Logan Paul some real-world money with very little effort, but players who purchased the in-game currency were left out in the cold. But that's where YouTuber Coffeezilla, real name Steven Findezen, comes in. He's been investigating Paul's promises and the demise of CryptoZoo since at least 2022, calling Paul out for being a scammer. And now Logan Paul has filed a defamation lawsuit against Coffeezilla. Paul alleges that he maliciously and repeatedly published false statements accusing Paul of operating a scam related to CryptoZoo, and that these lies have hurt his reputation, caused him significant emotional distress. Logan Paul was just an upstanding internet citizen who completely rehabilitated his image, and then Coffeezilla just came out of nowhere and ruined that good name. But first, what is CryptoZoo? Well, CryptoZoo was a Pokemon-inspired trading game where users could buy eggs, hatch them, and then breed the animals. To participate, users spend their non-fungible tokens, called Zoo Coins, to buy the eggs. The app runs on the Binance Smart Chain, and the NFTs are purchased with Ethereum. The game promised users that they could make real money this way. All you had to do was breed very rare digital hybrid animals and then watch your cachet of coins grow.
Bro, we have a massive team behind it and are probably out of pocket like $1 million just because we believe it's going to work.
It was a simpler time back then, and the sales pitch worked. Players purchased over $2.5 million worth of digital eggs, which helped create enough hype to convince the crypto market that the Zoo Coin's actual value was worth up to $2 billion. But here's the catch. CryptoZoo launched in September of 2021, but as of 2024, it's still not fully playable. Players who purchased the eggs couldn't breed them, let alone cash out the coins for real money, and investors said that the eggs were just a picture on a screen that was basically worth nothing whatsoever. And that's a pretty accurate description of an NFT. It took me and Steve Bold 27 minutes to say the same thing a few years ago. But the CryptoZoo development team left the project in October of 2021, alleging that, quote, Logan's team has stolen the tokens from all of its V3 investors, while also lying to the public that he had paid the devs $1 million. Now, while it's not unusual for a group of people to have creative differences, Paul's silence and the lack of playable game led many people to believe that they'd been conned. In December of 2022, Coffeezilla started a 3-part series on CryptoZoo. At first, Paul responded by blaming a developer who fled to Switzerland with the source code and held it hostage for $1 million. However, Coffeezilla tracked down this developer, Zach Kelling, who disputed everything Paul said about him. And reporters also discovered that Paul's other partner on the project, Eddie Ibanez, was a catch-me-if-you-can level liar. Paul's manager, Jeff Levin, allegedly knew about Ibanez's exaggerations before the CryptoZoo launch, but kept him on the team. Then Logan Paul filed his lawsuit in federal court in the United States District Court for the Western District of Texas. Though Logan Paul putatively lives in Puerto Rico and Coffeezilla and his company reside in Texas. Although many defamation complaints are filed in state court, filing in Texas federal court gives Logan Paul an advantage because Coffeezilla won't be able to use the Texas anti-SLAPP law. As you might know, a strategic lawsuit against public participation, or SLAPP suit, is a legal action intended to censor, intimidate, or silence critics by burdening them with the cost of legal defense. And the Texas Citizens Participation Act, or TCPA, allows defendants to file a motion to dismiss a legal action that infringes on their right to free speech. This motion can be filed early and often before the case proceeds to discovery, which saves a huge amount of money. However, Coffeezilla won't be able to use the TCPA to file an early motion to dismiss and recover costs because the Fifth Circuit, which rules over Texas, ruled that the state law doesn't apply in federal court. Parenthetically, I'll note that there's a circuit split where some federal courts will apply state-based anti-SLAPP laws and some will not, which is why we need a federal anti-SLAPP law. So without an applicable anti-SLAPP law, Coffeezilla's defense is going to get extremely expensive even if he's successful. But let's look at Logan Paul's lawsuit. Paul's complaint alleges that Coffeezilla's commentary about CryptoZoo perpetuates a false narrative that CryptoZoo was a scam orchestrated by Paul. He says that Coffeezilla knew he was making false statements when he published the videos. So what are the allegedly false and defamatory statements? Well, it started with the December 2022 YouTube series. Right off the bat, in response to those videos, Paul threatened to sue Coffeezilla. In a now deleted video, Paul said, quote,
"You led the charge to drive and monetize a narrative telling millions of people that I'm a fraud or I tried to scam my audience. that is patently false.
And Paul accused Coffeezilla of not reaching out to him to get the facts until December 24th, 2022. On Twitter, Coffeezilla said he contacted Paul in October seeking clarification about the CryptoZoo project, and you can see his questions for Paul on the Instagram post. And these messages went unanswered. And at the time, Paul swiftly backed down. Then Coffeezilla tweeted, quote, "Logan called me, he said he's deleting the 2 responses and is dropping the lawsuit threats." Coffeezilla had planned to release another video about CryptoZoo, but decided to delay the video so he could include Paul's response. And here was Logan Paul's later response, saying the war is not with coffee, and quote, "I'm grateful he brought this to light." He apologized and promised to come up with a plan to make things right. Coffeezilla warned Paul that he would continue to follow the CryptoZoo story, saying that, quote, "The right thing to do here is refunds for the affected victims. That's what this has always been about." Now, there's no actionable defamation in these old exchanges since Logan Paul acknowledges what Coffeezilla reported was true, and they're also outside of the 1-year statute of limitations for bringing libel claims in Texas. But that's where things get interesting because Logan Paul announced a 3-step plan to remedy the problem.
So I'd like to announce my 3-step plan moving forward. Step 1, Jeff and I are going to burn our Zoo tokens so we have no financial upside in the game and it will add value to holder tokens. Step 2, we want to offer a rewards program for players who are disappointed in the status of the game. So essentially you're gonna be able to burn your base egg or your base animal for the mint price, which was 0.1 ETH or the equivalent in BNB. I am personally committing 1,000 ETH to this, which is about $1.3 million right now for players who want to get out. And then step 3, obviously finish and deliver the game.
Now, Paul made promises to remedy the situation, but not everyone was happy. So some of the customers sued him and they went to arbitration, where they are represented by attorney Tom Kirker, who you might know by his online moniker, Attorney Tom. Now, put a pin in that, we're gonna come back to it. But fast forward 6 months later when Coffeezilla tweeted out, "Logan Paul really is the type of dude to thank you when you expose his scam, then block you when you remind him to pay up." Now, Logan Paul alleges that Coffeezilla's tweet is libel per se. A defamation or libel per se describes statements which are considered to be so harmful on their face that the plaintiff doesn't need to prove special damages, that they can get by with basically no damages and still file suit. In Texas, defamation per se includes accusing someone of having an infectious disease, accusing someone of a crime, or making statements that harm someone in their job or profession. Now, in this context, the allegation of defamation per se probably doesn't make any difference whatsoever. But in general, to prove defamation, he has to show 1, the publication of a false statement of fact, 2, that was defamatory concerning the plaintiff, and 3, that the person made the statement with actual malice, and 4, damages. And I'll remind you that the term actual malice is a legal term of art. It does not mean that the publication of false statements was made with mean intention, but rather that the plaintiff has to actually know that what they're saying is false or act with reckless disregard for the truth of that statement. And here Logan Paul alleges that, quote, "The accusation that Paul operated a financial scam is one that tends to harm his reputation so as to lower him in the estimation of the community or deter third persons from associating or dealing with him." The June 29th, 2023 X post is libelous per se, and that it tends to affect Paul in his profession or occupation and accuse Paul of engaging in illegal conduct. Now, according to Texas law, a statement constitutes defamation per se if it injures a person in his office, profession, or occupation, but this is interpreted narrowly so it doesn't prohibit legitimate complaints against a person for their professional conduct. And generally, disparagement of a general character equally discernible to all persons is not enough unless the particular quality of disparagement is of such a character that it is peculiarly valuable in the plaintiff's business or profession. Now, what is Logan Paul's profession? Arguably an influencer or boxer. He's not a developer, he's not a financial professional, nor does he have any special knowledge of NFTs and how the blockchain works, clearly. So really, even if it mattered here, the allegation of defamation per se probably wouldn't apply anyway. But anyway, Logan Paul says by 2023, Coffeezilla knew that CryptoZoo wasn't a scam. He says, quote, "The post was a gross and intentional distortion of Paul's prior statements in which he referenced Coffeezilla's research as a positive in the sense that it had helped expose the wrongdoing by Paul's former business partners, who had also hoodwinked and victimized Paul. Feinstein knew this, but he intentionally conveyed to the public the false accusation that Paul was a participant in a scam and intentionally defrauded people to increase his own profile by continuing to attack a well-known celebrity." And Logan Paul cites the mean tweets as proof that his reputation was ruined by Coffeezilla's scam comment. But number one, he would have a very hard time proving damages. But more to the point, there's little evidence to support the claim that Coffeezilla's characterizations were false in the first place. There was no completed game, his fans weren't paid back, and Coffeezilla discovered that the people that Logan Paul was working with had lied. Not to mention, this seems to be a classic opinion based on disclosed facts about the type of person that Paul is. In fact, they all seem to agree on the underlying facts that CryptoZoo was in fact a scam. The only difference is that Logan Paul is claiming that he was also a victim of bad developers as well, and Coffeezilla says that when you put your name on something and you run the whole project, the reputation is yours. Logan Paul doesn't like the implication, but you can't force your opinion onto someone else. In fact, Coffeezilla could probably write another tweet saying that Logan Paul is the type of person to sue you for defamation when you exercise your First Amendment rights. Moreover, to the extent that the tweet is factual, it seems accurate. Logan Paul has blocked Coffeezilla for years. He hasn't paid back all of his customers, so, where's the lie? Additionally, on June 30th, 2023, Coffeezilla published a video entitled Logan Paul's Scam Isn't Over. Logan Paul alleges that this video is defamation per se, again, objecting to the characterization of CryptoZoo as a scam. He says Coffeezilla, quote, left no doubt that he was accusing Paul of intentionally defrauding individuals who bought egg NFTs or Zoo tokens by referring to those people as his, Logan Paul's, victims, declaring to his audience that Paul was guilty and his offer to reimburse buyers of egg NFTs was an admission of guilt, and stating that Paul was just pretending he'd changed. This video has been viewed nearly 6 million times, and I highly recommend watching it again so it can be viewed 6,000,001 times. So, did Coffeezilla make false claims about Logan Paul in this video? Well, the point of the video was, quote, Logan Paul promised $1.8 million to the affected victims, saying, in the meantime, I have committed more than $1.8 million for those who do not want to wait for CryptoZoo to be completed. However, despite bragging about making millions with Prime, there have been no updates about the status of these updates. Now, Logan Paul says that Coffeezilla was, quote, aware at the time of the publication that these statements were false, or at a minimum had a high degree of awareness that the statements were probably false. But we can look to the video. Here's Logan Paul complaining that Coffeezilla reached out to his manager rather than him personally.
Maybe we could have talked about this if you had reached out to me, personally. Not my manager, Jeff, who is not me, Steven.
But when Coffeezilla reached out to Paul, he heard back from Paul's lawyer.
Well, I did reach out to you, and I got no response. In fact, the only response I got came on my 4th attempt to reach Logan, but this one came from his criminal defense lawyers. A guy named Jeffrey Neiman emailed me after my 4th attempt saying, Steven, see inserted on behalf of Logan Paul. Now, to be honest, I had no idea who Logan Paul was until I researched the lawyer and learned that he, quote, regularly defends individuals and corporations in white-collar criminal litigations. And that's when I realized, oh, that Logan Paul. Why didn't you just say you defended alleged white-collar criminals? Would have saved me a Google search. So I opened up the letter and it read, we represent Logan Paul. Mr. Paul has informed us of your outreach about the status of the CryptoZoo buybacks. Mr. Paul remains committed to this process. We are working with Mr. Paul to evaluate the best way to achieve this goal. In the meantime, please direct to our attention any further inquiries to Mr. Paul. Thank you for your patience and understanding. Now, that might seem like a good step in the right direction to you. At least we got a response on behalf of Logan.
And as Coffeezilla points out, there are two things absent from the lawyer's statement.
But when I read their response carefully, I realized things were actually worse than I thought. Because two things are absent from this statement. One, a timeline for refunds, and two, a plan for refunds. I mean, you have this abominable statement which says, we are working with Mr. Paul to evaluate the best way to achieve this goal? So you're still at the whiteboard then? Guys, this is a statement you say when you have no plan or you're stalling, right? You say, we're evaluating the best options. I mean, that's where Logan was back in January. He was evaluating. Am I supposed to believe 6 months later, you guys haven't figured this out? You've gathered all the boys in the office, brainstorming every single day. How do we refund people? And you don't know?
Now, recall that we talked about how Logan Paul is currently being sued in real life by Tom Kirker, attorney Tom, in arbitration, and they're seeking damages caused by Paul's crypto venture. But perhaps the most shocking thing about this whole thing is that Logan Paul's lawsuit, the complaint, actually admits a whole bunch of the stuff that attorney Tom was going to have to prove for that case, which is one of the reasons you should never file performative lawsuits in the first place. Even though it's the right thing to do, not filing a performative lawsuit, you should do it for self-interested reasons. Here, it'll very likely prejudice the defense of his case against the accusations in the other arbitration. Moreover, the whole complaint basically admits that CryptoZoo was broken beyond belief, which most people would qualify as a scam, but Logan Paul just claims to be a victim of his own developers. Now, it's not dispositive, but Merriam-Webster defines a scam as a fraudulent or deceptive act or operation. Paul committed $1.8 million to pay people back, but for some reason after 6 months, he never followed through on his 3-step plan. Though, in fairness, since there is a whole bunch of pending litigation, that might be the reason why he hasn't taken remedial steps. You need to figure all that out before you can start paying out millions of dollars. But still, one is allowed to have the opinion that by not paying off the victims, that you're simply perpetuating a scam. Here's Coffeezilla reading from the post where Paul outlined what he would do.
I mean, listen, he had more of a plan, Logan did, back in January. I'm not even sure what there is to even still figure out, because way back then, January 16th, he said, I've committed more than 1.8 million. For those who do not want to wait for CryptoZoo to be completed, players will be able to burn their base eggs and base animals for their mint price. I mean, there it is. That's the plan. Pay a blockchain dev to code that up and pay the victims their money. That's it.
This video also calls Paul out for not explaining himself for the delay in paying people back. And I can't fathom that there's anything false here. Many people were wondering about their refunds, but Logan Paul wasn't responding to them, leading them to conclude that he was being deceptive when he made the promises. Again, people are allowed to have their opinions based on the disclosed facts. And even Coffeezilla predicted that Logan Paul would eventually claim that he had to be silent because he was a defendant in a lawsuit.
Only he's tried this before, and it didn't make a lot of sense then either.
I had to rely on my team. I crumbled internally, and the advice was, while actual legal process was going on because of criminal investigation taking place that Coffeezilla highlighted in his series, I had to stay silent. And for a year, I'm hounding Jeff. How do we make this right?
So at base, Coffeezilla is going to have two probably pretty good defenses. First, these comments are 100% true. And second, they form the basis of his legally protected opinion, which is that Paul is a scammer because he cheated his fans out of millions of dollars. And then finally, Paul's third claim is that a January 5th, 2024 YouTube video called Logan Paul's Refund, Coffeezilla accused Paul of orchestrating a massive con, referred to Paul as a serial scammer, and claimed that Paul scammed those who bought Zoo tokens or CryptoZoo egg NFTs.
It is still 100% within Logan Paul's power as a near billionaire with Prime to make things right, fully right, with his fans who he scammed.
On January 4th, 2024, Paul officially announced on X that his CryptoZoo egg NFT buyback program was operational. He posted a link to a website where holders could submit a claim for buyback, with Paul committing up to 2.3 million of his own money to the effort. And on that same day, Paul sued Ibanez and Greenbaum, alleging that they'd scammed Paul and he relied on their advice. Now, Coffeezilla's January 5th video was published one day after Paul sued the developers and finally made a refund offer. Paul claims that since Coffeezilla had many of the documents and text messages Paul cited in his lawsuit, that any characterization of Paul as a con or a scammer is false and defamatory. But Coffeezilla's video explains that Logan Paul's refund offer came with a bunch of strings. He was offering up to 2.3 million, but the estimated damages are more than 18 million, and anyone who accepts the refund must waive their legal rights to participate in a lawsuit filed by attorney Tom or in any other legal action against Paul.
Logan may be losing. Put in that light then, this refund starts to look less like a good faith attempt to make things right and more like a cynical bargaining chip to avoid getting in even more trouble.
Now, I don't know if Logan Paul is acting in good faith, but Coffeezilla is perfectly entitled to that opinion. And there's no way to prove that factually, in Logan's brain, he had good intentions all along, including when his lawyers made a settlement offer. But Coffeezilla certainly has plenty of reasons for concluding that there was a con and a scam. And as he points out in the video, he watched Logan's fans beg for a refund for 3 years.
But I was wrong. I mean, I wasn't wrong the first time he said I was wrong when he said he was going to still finish the game. I was wrong that he was going to do it at all.
But even after 12 months of work, you've still managed to overlook one crucial piece of information. See, even though I've said it's coming so many times, you've assumed that CryptoZoo isn't being made. Who are you to decide when the development timeline ends? Trust me, CryptoZoo is coming. I will make damn sure of it.
Oops, so much for making damn sure of it, because there's no game.
And despite hemming and hawing about the game, Logan Paul didn't actually finish the CryptoZoo game. And ironically, the lawsuit that Logan Paul filed against the developers made good use of Coffeezilla's investigations and videos about Ibanez's background and Greenberg's secret sales of tokens.
Turns out Eddie Ibanez's entire backstory was a fabrication, including the MIT NFL story. Can you believe it? It's like, yeah, we know. And then he goes, yeah, well, you won't believe what I discovered. Crypto King secretly sold tokens. Yeah, we know. Logan just shamelessly rips off my work claim for claim without citing me. I mean, he says things like, Mr. Greenbaum would later admit that he made millions of dollars through his surreptitious sales of Zoo tokens. But where did Logan find that admission? Was it perhaps when he investigated my video? Time and time again, this lawsuit copies my work, but is embarrassed to cite it. So they even have to say things like, based on public reports. What public report? Mr. Ibanez made approximately $1.7 million from selling Zoo tokens. I could swear I've heard that before. And for my calculations, he made about $1.7 million.
So Logan Paul has sued Coffeezilla for making false statements because he keeps repeating facts that Paul has acknowledged in his own lawsuit against the developers are true. But Logan Paul just doesn't like how Coffeezilla has characterized these facts. Now, sure, Logan Paul wants people to look at these same facts and conclude that he had positive intentions and that he got taken advantage of the bad guys. And maybe you do, but you're also welcome to conclude that Logan Paul is a serial scammer, because two people can draw different conclusions from the same facts, and it doesn't qualify as defamation. And while things that are labeled as opinion can sometimes give rise to defamation, they still need to be a verifiable fact. And there's actually case law applying the word scam in the context of a cryptocurrency scheme. And courts have decided that using the word scam in the context of a cryptocurrency scheme is generally not a verifiable fact that can be proved true or false. But even if you could, it would still qualify as an opinion. And that makes sense. We call things scams all the time when there's an outcome that we don't necessarily like. Logan Paul asserts that you can only use the word scam to describe something where they intentionally intended something to steal money from someone, but that just doesn't jive with the regular definition of scam that we use all the time. Though it might actually apply in this case too. We don't know. Now, Logan Paul's lawsuit seeks compensatory damages for the harm to his reputation, emotional distress, and punitive damages, and an injunction to prevent Coffeezilla from continuing to report on CryptoZoo. But the bottom line is that Logan Paul filed this lawsuit because he wants to silence his main critic. And that's the very definition of a SLAPP suit. And even though Coffeezilla won't be able to use the TCPA, he still has every other defense to a defamation lawsuit, including his statements are true facts, and also his own opinions. The First Amendment also protects rhetorical hyperbole, which is how we describe exaggerated over-the-top speech employed for rhetorical effect. And frankly, even if these statements were defamatory, Paul would probably struggle to prove damages. Now, so far, Coffeezilla hasn't said anything publicly, which is very smart. He's hired some great attorneys, and it looks like he'll let them do the talking, which again is smart, because when it comes to IRL legal disputes, the shit gets real. Now, as far as I know, Coffeezilla has not started a GoFundMe or a campaign to recoup any of his legal defense costs, and those can get astronomically expensive. Ethan Klein of H3H3 incurred hundreds of thousands of dollars in a fair use dispute, and that was 10 years ago. But the next best thing would be to support Coffeezilla on Patreon, which is where he gets most of his funding anyway. I'll put a link to Coffeezilla's Patreon in the description of this video. I highly recommend becoming a member of Coffeezilla's Patreon and contributing what you can. Coffeezilla does great work, and it would be a real shame to let someone like Logan Paul silence Coffeezilla. And in fact, I did a little digging and found that Coffeezilla is actually represented by some very good attorneys. In fact, if you've been watching this channel for a while, you might actually have heard of them, because Coffeezilla has retained Mark Bankston and Bill Ogden over at Farrer and Ball. They have been spearheading much of the defamation litigation against Alex Jones and are responsible for the approximately $50 million verdict for the Texas plaintiffs against Jones. And Bankston in particular is responsible for what might be the cross-examination of the decade, when he created the Perry Mason moment, when he crossed Alex Jones on the stand and caught him in a lie after Jones's attorney accidentally sent Bankston the contents of Jones's phone. We talked about that at the time. It was an epic and textbook cross-examination skewering. So Coffeezilla is in pretty good hands. But don't take it from me, I reached out to Coffeezilla's lawyers and got Mark Bankston on the phone. Mark, thanks for being here. You are actually representing Coffeezilla, is that correct?
No, that's correct. My partner Bill Ogden and I have agreed to represent Coffeezilla in this very exciting suit.
You know, in the world of online lawyers, there's a whole spectrum of people that are qualified and that are not. Quick perusal of your resume seems to indicate that you guys know your way around defamation.
Yeah, most folks are probably aware of my defamation practice through the lawsuits that I brought against Alex Jones and InfoWars on behalf of several Sandy Hook parents. This situation is used on a different foot. This will actually be the first time that we are defending someone from a defamation suit, but it is something we very strongly believe in this particular case.
What has happened so far?
Right now, very little has happened. There hasn't been an answer in the suit or anything like that. You would usually, in most states at this point, face an anti-SLAPP motion. That type of motion is not available in federal court in the Fifth Circuit in Texas. In this case, the federal court venue was chosen, and there seems to be no obvious reason for that except to avoid the anti-SLAPP motion. Ironically, this is a very, very vicious attack on Coffeezilla's reputation that really he has no way to vindicate except going in the court and winning on this suit.
Reading the complaint, I was very surprised that Logan Paul had completely rehabilitated his image, and then Coffeezilla just came out of nowhere and besmirched him for no reason whatsoever. So I found that to be very surprising.
Yeah, it seems far-fetched. I guess we'll have to see where discovery takes us on that. Definitely. I mean, look, you can look at this suit And it has all of the hallmarks of a classic SLAPP suit. There's not a single person on this planet who can look at the situation and say that Coffeezilla knew and intended to tell lies about Logan Paul. I think I knew it before he became my client. I think I know it way more now. If there's something that man cares about, it's the truth. He is devoted to that principle, like very few journalists that I see today. This case really presents a David and Goliath type problem. You look at somebody like Coffeezilla, yes, he has a lot of YouTube subscribers. I mean, I'm sure he makes money. I'm sure he does fine. He's not anywhere near the capacity of his opponent. I mean, his opponent has an unlimited war chest to come at him and could essentially use this suit to drive him off the internet. We're not going to let that happen.
So in terms of next steps, I would assume there would be a motion to dismiss based on the allegations of the complaint, or maybe if you wanted to get feisty, pre-answer discovery. I don't know if that's available.
Absolutely. I mean, look, you can't look at that complaint and not think judgment on the pleadings. I mean, that's just what you think the moment you see it. Are the statements being made even something that can be verified as true or false? What does it mean to call something a scam? The word scam can be interpreted a lot of different ways, and it does not mean one thing to all people. Businesses and bad deals are described as scams constantly.
This is not the only suit that Logan Paul is in related to the crypto scheme. He's currently facing other lawsuits related to the nature of that, and it seemed to me that a lot of those allegations are going to be deleterious for the litigation that he's in outside of this particular case.
The thing that I kept thinking to myself is that if I'm any one of those claimants in those cases, I'm extremely interested in the things that were said in this complaint. And as a result, going to be very interested in how this lawsuit progresses. All right, dude. Thanks for having me. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot. Take care. But even with great lawyers, lawsuits are still stressful, and it's easy to lose your appetite. Unless you use today's sponsor, Factor. Because Factor makes meeting your nutrition goals easier than ever by delivering fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep. And the meals are completely ready to eat in just 2 minutes. You can eliminate the hours it would take to shop, meal prep, and cook, so you can spend your day doing the things that you actually want to do. You can choose from over 35 different options a week, including ones that are keto, calorie smart, vegan, and veggie, and more. And on top of that, Factor offers lots of snack options for when you don't feel like a full meal, like breakfast smoothies, juices, small bites, and more, just to keep going no matter what's on the schedule. And Factor meals arrive at your door pre-prepared and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. The same amount of time that I can even think about going to the grocery store, my Factor meal is already done. Which is great because sometimes I just want a good, healthy meal without having to cook. And it's surprisingly affordable as well. Way less expensive than takeout and those pricey delivery apps. And now Factor offers Gourmet Plus meals as part of your weekly options, so you can try meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, truffle butter, broccolini, and asparagus. But honestly, you can't go wrong with their normal offerings either. Factor's team of gourmet chefs creates each meal to help you feel your best all day long, and they really are extremely delicious. And Factor is completely flexible. You can pause or reschedule your deliveries at any time. But all this is making me hungry, so click on the link below or the one that's on screen and use the code LegalEagle50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next month of orders. Again, just click on the link below and use the code LegalEagle50 for 50% off your first Factor box and then 20% off your next month of orders. And after that, click on this box over here for more Legal Eagle, or I'll see you in court.